Hey everybody, and welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Flynn, and I'm joined by Alwyn Hunt. Alwyn, how are you doing today?
Excellent. Thank you, Flynn. Thanks for asking, mate. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. It's a bit cold in Adelaide, I hear, in these early mornings that
Uh,
we've got you up.
yeah, it's freezing. Been very, very cold the last few mornings. So, yeah, looking forward to getting into this and taking my mind off the cold weather.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm glad I brought that up. Hey everybody in chat. Hey Steve. Hey Dee. Good to see you guys in there. Cornell, great to have you. Calvin, Chris. Johanna, thanks for looking after us today. Mark Wells, Sam Peterson, so good to see you all here today. This is our second episode in a series that we have on getting started in 3D. And I love these series when I know very little about it. And so, Alwyn, maybe you could give us a bit of a recap on. Actually, before we do, check it out. We have a schedule ready for this week. Just before we jump into today's episode, let's check this out. So here we are. It's 8:30 here in Sydney. Getting started with 3D. This is part 2 with Alwyn Hunt. And this is a 4-part series, so we're back again the next 2 weeks. On Thursday at 9 o'clock, we have, Sisters Tomorrow, we have photography with TK North or Tim Northey. That's going to be super exciting. It's his Adobe Live debut. And then on Friday, we have a double whammy. We've got photo manipulation with Ramesh. And we have at 11 o'clock, typography. So Sophie Eleanor is going to come back and animate some type for us. It's a pretty cool week. Very excited. Lots of exciting stuff going on. So I'll shut up. Alwyn, maybe you can give us a bit of a recap on what we learnt in episode 1.
Yeah, so I guess just to think about what we actually covered last week, which is a lot of material. We looked at the 3D production pipeline, and we sort of went through that, and then we just narrowed down to a couple of those different disciplines, which were modeling and texturing. So I just went through the basic sort of principles of creating a 3D model in a 3D package. Very simple stuff. And then just talked briefly about UVs and UV unwrapping and how to actually do that sort of 2D image that we can then paint on for texturing. Then I took in a model into Substance Painter, where I was able to actually paint on the model, use materials that we were able to grab from Substance Source, and just really show how familiar Substance Painter is to people when you look at Photoshop. So it was just really just showing that it's actually not that hard now for people to get into and be able to start modeling and texturing assets. So that was kind of last week, and then I think we had a bit of a Q&A, and that was kind of where we left off. The hour went very, very quickly, as I'm expecting it to go today as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, one of the within the app, within Substance, and just the similarities between something like Photoshop, a lot of the terminology was very similar, and we saw a lot of those like blending modes and things like that. That was like, oh yeah, this is like seems much more familiar. We even brought in textures. We even brought in Carl T. Webster brushes. Like it felt like home for anyone that's ever been on Adobe Live before. But cool. Well, I mean, let's get started. Hey guys, so you can ask questions as we're going along. Please do. I'll be asking lots of questions of Alwyn as we go. But we also have a Q&A break at about halfway. So we'll have a little timer set up for that, so you guys know when that's coming, and we'll take a short break. Give Alwyn a second to think about some of the questions that we've been asking him as well. So over to you, Alwyn. Should we jump over to your screen?
Yeah, brilliant. So the first thing I'm going to do actually is just bring up Substance. Can you see my screen now?
Yep, we've got you now. Yep.
Okay, cool. So the first thing I want to do is actually just kind of pick up where we left off last week, and I've got the Substance launcher here, and what I wanted to do was just actually dive into Substance Alchemist, which was another little app which I thought was a really good entry point for people wanting to get into a bit of texturing, and I didn't really get time to cover that last week. So in my launcher, I've got Substance Alchemist. I'm just going to launch this. Now, Alchemist is really about taking those materials that we looked at on Substance Source, the pre-existing materials, and being able to actually layer them up to create even further materials. And it's not technical. Again, we're using a layer stack on our right hand side here, really just to build the new material. So what we're presented with is a 3D viewport here. So you can see I've just got like a basic plane in my viewer. I can actually change that so that I've got a different mesh. So I've got, if I wanted to, if I'm working in, say, retail and I'm wanting to experiment with different types of fabrics, I can, click on this t-shirt and it brings up like a little 3D model of a t-shirt, and then I can essentially go through and just drag and drop, different materials on top of this model, and I can just, like I said, just start really experimenting with it. So maybe I want to just drag that one on top of there, because I grab. So you can see, and I can rotate my lights around the 3D model, very similar to Painter in the sense of lighting and that type of thing. But what I wanted to do today was just really run through how quickly I could create an old cobblestone path just from an image. So the beautiful thing with Substance Alchemist is that I can take a photo on my phone, be able to drag that into Alchemist, and be able to create my own unique material from that. So, for example, if you can't find a material on Substance Source or in Substance Painter, then this is where you would go to create, a material from the sort of the ground up based off an image. So let me just go back to my plane. I'm going to just jump in here, going to throw that on plane, and I'm just going to clear that layer stack. So you can see here I just created those two layers. I'm just going to delete those materials, and I'm just going to pull up an image that I grabbed off Adobe stock, and it's just of I don't know if you can see that, but I'll pull it across, but it's just of a brick wall. Now the problem when you're creating a base material is you can see that there's all this shadow and lighting information. So when you're creating material in a 3D world, you don't want natural lighting affecting that material. You want the 3D lighting to be able to control, be the light source, rather than this what they call baked-in lighting. Right. So in the old days, me as a texture artist would get an image like this, and then have to go through and try and using in Photoshop, using levels, and try and just take out the shadows and the highlights and all that sort of very painful job. But with Alchemist, it has really smart technology behind it, and it's this latest release it's AI powered, which when you look at the science behind it is just truly incredible and does all this work for us. So what I'm going to do is just drag that image straight into my viewport, and it's going to give me a couple of options here. So it's got image to material, AI powered. Now this is the beast. This is where all the magic happens. If I've got more than one image, so maybe I've gone out and I've created more than one image, I can bring in multiple images, and that's just going to give me more detail. So I'm going to hit image to material. I'm going to hit OK. And you're going to see what happens here. So you can see on our layer stack, it's created a couple of layers already. It's going through and it's processing. So you can see now in my viewport, that brick wall has come through. And we can see that a lot of that lighting information has been taken out of it already. So what it does is, when we look back to last week, and I was talking about texture maps, and you've got like your roughness map, and you've got your color map, and you've got your bump map, and all those different maps. What it does here, it automatically splits all that out for me. So if I have a look at and I've just split my screen there from the 3D viewport into a 2D. So exactly what we were doing in Substance Painter, but you can see down here that it's automatically split out all these maps for me, which is brilliant. So I'll go back into my 3D view, and you can see here that I want it to be able to tile. So I want to be able to use this material to add it to, a footpath, and I'm not going to see these seams. So you can see if I zoom in here, it's pretty obvious here. You can see that hard edge and down there. So what I want to be able to do is actually tile this and get rid of those edges to have a seamless material. So there's a couple of ways of doing that, but I can come over here to my filters, and you can see that I've got tools down here. So I'm just clicking on here. So inside our filters, there's a bunch of like tools that are able to help us with this. So all I'm going to do is go down. Sorry, I'm going to go into scan processing, this one here, and grab tiling. And you can see down here, all I do is drag that straight into my viewport again. It's going to add it to my layer stack. Now you can see here it's defining where the edge is. So what I want to do is just bring this in slightly, and it's going to go through and start calculating the edge and basically just work out, okay, how can I try and use pixel information to really be able to disguise where that seam is. So you can see there, it's already doing a pretty decent job. So I can come in and I've got a few options just to be able to help it along and just, really try and get rid of those edges. So I can come through and I'm just pulling these edges and just trying to find a nice spot where the actual merger sort of happens. And I just pull that up a little bit so there's a kind of a nice seam there. Again, I can just play with my blur just to smooth it, and maybe my threshold just to help break that up a bit. So you can see there I've kind of already gotten rid of that tile, which is really, really nice. And that usually takes a very long time. In the old days, that would take, hours to do.
You're having flashbacks to late nights and long weekends, like.
Oh my goodness! I tell you, the technology of today. Only if I had it back in the day. When, and I'm just going to rotate my lights across the surface here, so you can see that. You can see the rock. It's with all that information that we had with the detail in between the rocks has come through. So I'm just rotating my lights around that. I can disable the shadows so we can see it there, or I can enable the shadows just to see that detail is coming through. So the next thing I want to do is really just add a bit of dirt and grime and grunge and some moss, just to start making it look like a bit of an old cobbled street. So I've got some weathering tools here. I can hit my space bar, and that's going to bring up this same little filter menu, so I don't have to hurt my neck going across there. And I can type in dirt, and you can see my filters come up there, and I can just click on that. Again, it's just adding it to my stack. I can move these layers around as I desire. So you can see that it just added some dirt to it. So I've got this little palette here, which is controlling the parameters for that dirt. So I can just click on that and go, you know what, maybe I want lots of dirt coverage, or not so much. So I can really just control the level of dirt that I want on that. I can control the color of it, the volume of it. So I've got a whole bunch of little parameters in here that I can just start tweaking as I so desire. So I'm going to add a little bit of dirt like that. I'm not going to go over the top, and you can see, it just helps grunge that the bricks up a little bit. Maybe I can add some. Again, I'm going to hit my space bar. I'm going to hit moss. And this is why it's so much fun. You can just experiment with this, and like you can get stuck in this honestly for hours playing with this stuff. So I've got moss now. I've just added that on top of it, and we can see that if I just go through and just turn that off for a sec, see how much is coming through. I can just play with the different settings here. Maybe I want to have it on top, so you can see that moss coming through on top of the bricks there. Maybe it's a little bit strong, so again I can just pull back on how much coverage I want on it. Maybe I just want to be able to desaturate it a little bit so that it actually matches, a bit closer towards, the bricks. And then I've got, a little bit of moss action happening there. Again, you've got moss clumping and sizing, so there's a whole bunch of parameters in there that I could be playing with as well. One of my favorite filters, and really has a bit of a wow factor, is when I add water. So again, I'm going to hit my space bar, and I'm going to just hit. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to just actually add an adjustment layer, because traditionally, if it's going to be a wet pavement, then you're going to see the stones are going to be a lot more shinier than what they currently are. So I can hit my space bar, and I'm just going to hit adjust. And once I've got that on there, I can come through, and I can control how shiny that surface is. So I can add. I'm just going to go extreme here. So I'm going to push it right across there, get some angle, and I'm just going to run my lights. You can see how shiny that is now.
Yeah. On
top of the surface. So if I dial that back a little bit, you can see it gets dull again. So I'm going to just amp that up so that it's nice and shiny. And maybe that's just below my moss and dirt a little. I'll put it below my moss, so I can just adjust that.
And that's that, as we were talking about before, those layers on the right side. That's like everyone familiar with Photoshop and a lot of other apps with layers. That's exactly how that works. You just move the layers around because you wanted it to be below or above the moss, right?
Exactly. I'm just holding left mouse button, clicking, and then just dragging and moving that
Yeah.
in between the layers as I so need. So I can go through, and I'm just going to add the last one, which is water. I'll just click on that, and it's going to give us a really cool effect with water sitting on top of the surface. So I'm just going to zoom into that a little bit so everyone can see it. Now, if I just rotate my lights across that, you can see that that water is just filling into those cracks now really nicely. Again, I can control the level of that water. I can just bring it right back down, or I can bring it right back up so it's covering it all. What I love about the water is you can see there's this sort of grunge sitting on the surface of the water. I can actually just turn that off so it's clear water or grungy water depending on what my look is. So there's and I can control, you know, the quality of that water. So there's all sorts of parameters that I can sit here and have fun with. So I'm just going to dial that water back a little bit, so we've kind of got a street that's just been rained on, and you can see there that, you know, within minutes I've got this, you know, pavement which has got water, moss, dirt, all sorts of fun stuff on top of it.
And that's tiled, like that's a repeatable pattern. So you're showing like
exactly. So now if I go back in here and I hit T on my keyboard, so you can see it's tiling out now, and we don't see any of those seams. So I can use this, you know, if I'm doing architecture or I'm, you know, building a game or for visual effects or whatever it is, I've got this tileable texture now that I can add down onto a big pavement, and I'm not going to see any seams. And I've got all this control that I can come back through, and at any stage, maybe I want to add more dirt to it, so I can just, you know, be able to use these sliders and be able to, you know, add the different grime and dirt on top of it. So it's very powerful. I'm not hand painting. You can see that, you know, in the old days, I'd have to hand paint a lot of the mask to be able to add this dirt. It's all procedurally done and just very time efficient. So a fantastic little tool. Like I said, you can have loads of fun in here with all these different materials. I can add things like leaves and sticks and stones as a gravel generator to add even further detail. Once I've gone through there, I can save this. I can actually save it, and I can do a couple of things once that's been saved. So I can either collapse this whole layer stack. So think of that like in Photoshop when you're merging all your layers.
Merging layers,
or
yeah.
I can just, and once you've merged all your layers, then I can build on top of that again and just keep adding and adding and adding and adding more complexity to it. Or I can just save this as a material, and then when I double click on it, it will re-expose all these layers again, which is really cool. And once I've finished my material, I can then export this and then bring it into, you know, Substance Painter. I can use it to bring the maps into other, you know, like Unreal Engine. I can you know, be able to use those maps in a lot of other programs as well. So really powerful stuff. I thoroughly recommend people just, you know, as a starting point, if they're wanting to get into some texturing and just playing around with these materials, then Alchemist is a really fun app to be able to do that.
So there was a question from chat actually. Yeah, so Substance is more like material designer, right? So maybe you could talk about difference between, because there's Substance Alchemist, Substance Painter that we've covered. So maybe you could just qualify that for us.
Yeah, so Substance Painter is being able to take your 3D model, so something that you've created or you've gotten from somewhere else, bring it into Substance Painter and be able to use materials and be able to paint directly onto the model. In Substance Alchemist, we've got, you know, like I showed before, we've got a few base meshes that you're able to actually create materials from. You can't import in geometry at the moment into Substance Alchemist. And like I said, it's really about going, okay, cool. I've got materials in Substance Painter, but I didn't quite get what I was looking for. Maybe the material didn't have enough dirt, or for whatever reason, you just felt like you weren't, you know, getting the desired look that you wanted from those base materials. Then you can just start building on these and start creating your own collections as well, you know. And it's really just about exploring with pre-existing materials. And the biggest thing is that, you know, you can, like I said before, take a photo, you can grab it from the internet, whatever it is, and be able to just create a material from it. I could, you know, just take a photo here, be able to drag it straight in here and be able to create a base material. That's the power of it, that you're able to generate your own bespoke materials.
Yeah, super cool.
So yeah, when you're in, I was just going to show when you're actually in the launcher, for example, I can go across to Substance Source here and be able to, if I just go into, say, a leather or whatever it is, you can see that there's these little icons here. So I can actually kick these materials straight across into my program that I'm working on, which is really cool. And you can see here, I can even push it across to Maya if I'm working in Maya. And that shows up over here in the shelf. You can see these are ones that I've pushed across from Substance, from the launcher, and they just appear here in my menu.
Yeah, so cool.
And like I was, and if I was to look at, if I was to look for material, maybe I'd do like brick wall here or something like that. And you can see that's probably something that, that I just created then is already existing to a certain level. So, I mean, you'd be hard pushed not to find a material like this that hasn't already been created in Substance Source. So yeah, but like I said, you can take even these base materials and start building on top of these as well. So it's just adding, being able to create further variations from that.
Yeah, for sure. I'll just Jay in chat was just saying they just started Substance Academy for Painter, and I think you mentioned Substance Academy before. So I just thought maybe we should just quickly mention what that is as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Substance Academy is really the training portal for Substance. It's a fantastic resource. Wes McDermott and Lawrence do an amazing job of creating these, tutorials and videos explaining Substance, and it has the various levels. So if you're a complete beginner through to somebody that's more advanced, this is the first place that I recommend people to go to if they're wanting to learn Substance. Like you can watch some of these. Even this one here, it's a beginner's, and it goes through painting this lamp. If you were to watch that, you would have a full understanding of Substance Painter and be able to, start painting and doing your own assets pretty much straight away. Yeah, so you can go through and you can select by software. So you can see up here, you've got your different menus. So if I wanted to have a look at Alchemist, again, getting started with Alchemist, there's a whole, tutorial series with those that they're cut up into bite size. So it's really nice to be able to go through them. Awesome. So that's Substance Academy.
There you go.
Really good documentation, just talking about the technology of texturing and physically base rendering and a few more technical terms. But if you really think, hey, texturing is an amazing thing, I'd like to get into it, then I strongly recommend just going through, reading some of this stuff, doing some of the tutorials. So that's Substance Academy. So what I wanted to do now, if I just bring it back to our slide deck, is the next episode, which is talking about rigging and animation. So I just want to leave off with texturing now and move into the next sort of stage of that production pipeline. So I'm just going to recap by having a look of what we've covered. This was the image from last week, which I really like, and it helps explain the 3D production pipeline. So we've covered modeling, we've covered texturing. Now we're going to move into rigging and what that means, and animation. So these are the next two that I want to cover today. Cool. So if I talk about rigging, what is rigging? So I'm just going to bring that up. So we've got. So yeah, what is rigging? So rigging refers to the process of actually adding bones or virtual bones to a 3D model. So essentially, when you think of the human anatomy and our bone structure, it's a very similar idea when you're working with 3D characters. Now, it's not just characters that you add bones to. You add bones pretty much to anything, and it really. Once these bones have been added, it allows an object to be animated freely. So you can then transform these bones. So you can rotate, you can move the position, you can scale them, and all these fun things that you can do with the bones. But essentially, if you record that over a timeline, and you're adding keyframes to that timeline, that's what is generating the animation. So for example, a basic setup may take a few hours to do to be able to rig a character or an object. So anything from a door, so if you want a door to open, you could have, or if you had a door, you could animate it without bones, but if you wanted to maybe have ripple or do some effects or whatever it is, then you can add bones to pretty much anything. To more complex characters like Schmorg, in The Hobbit, which took weeks to rig, so they can be quite complex. So when you think of the role of a rigging artist, it's very technical. They have to know coding. They have to be able to understand, what the requirements of an animator, who's the next person that's going to basically receive this model. They have to understand what the animator's requirements are going to be able to, get a performance out of this character. If the character is not rigged properly, then it makes the animator's job really, really hard. They need to be able to do facial expressions. They need to be able to do lots of movements and squashing and stretching with these characters to be able to get a performance out of it. So what I want to do today is take you through some basic programs which actually auto-generate a rig, and then take you to the other extreme, which is showing you a professional model and how somebody in the industry would, look at this professional model and be able to animate it. So the cool thing with an auto generator, and we've got one, and this is actually an Adobe product, and I'm not trying to spruik Adobe products here, but this one is
don't
a
worry
really
about that. We do it all the time.
yeah. This is Mixamo. I don't know if people have heard of this, but it's a really fun web-based app. So if you jump onto mixamo.com, you can register an account. It's completely free. You've got all these characters that you can go through and be able to select a character and add animations to it. And it's so fun to use. And from these, you can actually export out. It's going to ask me to log back in, but you could actually export out these characters and bring them into an augmented reality program like Arrow as well. So you can be in your home, you can have import these models in, and they can be dancing in your living room. It's a lot of fun. So let's have a look at what we've got here. So again, I'm just going to select a character.
Oh, look, it's like a dance party. Everyone's moving around.
Yes, exactly. So I can select any character here. So maybe I've got my zombie dude here. I'm going to use this character. And you can see he comes up in my viewport. Now these are, quite sort of low res models. Like it's, more sort of targeted towards games and indie developers and things like that, rather than high-end visual effects. But you can import in your own model, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. And you can see I can go through, I've got two tabs up here, characters and animations. If I jump into animations, you can see all these really fun animation loops that have already been created for us. Now, I can just click on one of these, and maybe I'll do like dance or something like that. I'll just select dance here. And I can click this hip hop dance. So I'm just clicking on that. It's going to assign that animation directly to my model, which is really cool because these models have already been rigged. They've already got bones in it. And then I can go through and actually just change, the animation itself with a few sliders across here. So you can have a lot of fun just with these characters if you're wanting to sort of start out and just see how animations are created and the different loops. It's a lot of fun. And like I said, you can export this out and bring it into Arrow as well. So this would have logged me out, but I already, oh no, maybe not. So I actually went across to stock, Adobe stock, and you can see there's, I don't know how many people know that, but there's actually a 3D section in Adobe stock. So I can click on that, and then I'm based here in my 3D search, and I just did a search for a skeleton, and I downloaded this skeleton that I was able then to bring across into Mixamo. So you can see I've uploaded this, so I just went to upload character, imported in my skeleton, and the next thing I want to show you is how easy it is to be able to rig this. So this is going back to what I said before about adding bones to a 3D model. So I've got these loops here that I can go through, and I'm just positioning them so I can move it across. You can see it's got a little magnifying glass that helps me just position that onto the elbows. I want to move that across onto my knees, and then I can move this to the groin section. And then once I've lined up those circles with the different areas of my bones, of the model, I can hit next. And what it's going to do, it's going to run through and actually auto-generate these bones for me. Now I'm going to help you visualize what these bones look like. While that's going through, I've already exported out this character from Mixamo and added him into to Maya. So this is the 3D program that I was using last week when I was creating a model. So you can see here we've got our base skeleton, but you see these pink sort of lines that are happening. Now I'm just going to hide that mesh. I'm just going to hit Control H on my keyboard to hide it. Now this is what it's automatically generated for me. So this is a bone structure of this skeleton. And you can see that, you know, it's going from the hip down to the knees to the feet. So it's essentially the same as a human body. Like what we're doing, it's got a back spine here that that you're able to then start moving around. Now this bone structure is what goes through a process of what they call skinning, and just think of that base model attaching to to the bones there. So let me just unhide. If I just unhide the geometry again, and we can see that animation that's come through. Now if I just hit play, so all I've done is imported in that model that we just created out of Mixamo, and if I hit play, it's going to run through and just it's going to slowly for the first pass it'll just go through, but it's brought through that animation that we assigned to the geometry. So wow. You can see that, you know, really quickly it's generated bones, added an animation, and we've got our character that's dancing in our 3D viewport here. So to do this manually takes quite a bit of time. You know, you have to individually create these bones and link it all up and all the rest of it. So to be able to run that through Mixamo and do it quickly is really, really great. So you can see a character, it's just running through the timeline here. Now I will say, because the animation has been captured, and I'm going to talk about this technique later on, but it's been captured doing a process called mocap, or motion capture. And that's, you might have seen on TV where people are running around, you know, maybe in a behind the scenes of a film where people are running around in a green suit and it's got markers all over it. So those markers are sensors that it's capturing data of like movement. So this is exactly what those little animation cycles that we've seen in Mixamo are. They're motion capture animation. So you can see our skeleton character here now dancing to Thriller and just having a bit of fun in our viewport. So when I click, I'm just going to stop that animation for a sec, and you're going to see how heavy. So I'm going to click down on this group of keys here. So what you'll see here is this bright red line down the bottom. So this is a timeline. So like I was saying before, we can add keyframes to a timeline to be able to animate our characters. So you can see here that every single frame has got a keyframe on it. So it means that it's really heavy for the computer to basically computate, because there's a keyframe on every keyframe, on every frame there, sorry. Right. So what we like the computer to do is to essentially work out, hey, you know what, if I've got a key pose, and I'm going to talk more about this when we get into animation later, but if you've got like a key pose from A and then another key pose to B down here, we try and let the computer work out what that animation is in between, right, without adding the keyframe at every single stage. When we look at this is more related to the old way of animation. You know, when you do your flip book and you're having to draw every single page to be able to do that sort of flip book animation, that's kind of what it's doing here. It's doing every single frame.
Cool.
So that's just a really easy, quick way to be able to take a character from Mixamo, add some bones to it, export it out, and bring it into a 3D program to be able to, you know, animate and start playing with.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm just mesmerized because I'm just learning so much about all this stuff. It's super cool. But yeah, if you do have any questions, chat. You might be the same as me, just kind of sitting back and watching and taking it all in. But yeah, if you do have questions, let us know. And we're about 12 minutes or so away from our Q&A break. So we've gathered a couple of questions. If you have questions around 3D, we were talking a bit about getting into 3D. Like if you're considering getting in, Alwyn has some tips and advice and places to send you and resources and stuff. So don't be afraid to ask any kind of questions around the industry, getting started, and of course anything that we're showing today.
No problem. So yeah, I just wanted to show you this character here, and his name's Twigs. He's a cowboy character, and he was actually created for an animation challenge, like it was for young people or for anybody actually that wanted to do a bit of a challenge using this character. It was actually rigged by a good friend of mine, Mike Fabris, who owns a company in New York called Dr. Real, and it's a professional rig. So I'm just going to play this and let it go through, so you can see that we're not seeing the bones. We're actually seeing these curves. Now, what happens is once you've added all those bones to a character, you don't want an animator going in there and having to isolate these individual bones to try and make it move. So what they do is they create these curves, and these curves are really, presets for certain animations, and they'll be selecting a group of bones and going, okay, cool. Once I've selected this curve, maybe, if you think of it for the hand, for example, instead of going through and individually animating and the bones at the joints, there might be a parameter there or a preset where you can just go, okay, I want the finger to roll, and it will just do a lot of the work again for you. So it's really just helping speed up the animation process. And this is again what the rigging artist does. They have to have a really good understanding of anatomy. They have to have a good understanding of how the animator, just because if you haven't got all these curves doing facial expressions and being able to get that performance, it makes, like I said before, it makes the animator's job really, really hard. So what I want to do is actually load this character up and just show you what it looks like. So you can see there we've got the curves. So I'm just going to jump across into Maya again, and I'm just going to go File, and I'm going to open, I think I've already got it, Recent Twigs here. I'm not going to save our thriller, The Dancing Skeleton. And this will give you an idea of exactly what a professional rig will work with. Now the good thing with being able to see this model is that it's accessible to everybody. So it's a free rig. So anybody can go out there and download this today. So if I just jump across into my web browser, I think I've already got the tab open. So you can go to this URL, which is Dr. Real, and you can actually download this character straight from here. There's a bunch of places that you can actually get free rigs from. What I recommend to people that are first starting out is actually going to places like Animation Mentor, where you've got like a ball or a flower, sack flower, that you want to just start with a really basic model, and right. Something that only has one or two curves that you can just start, you don't want to get overwhelmed with having all these different curves and parameters and trying to make a character work. The most basic animation that you should start to learn is of a bouncing ball. So we're going to go through, what that means with an animation, and then in the second part of this episode. But you just want to start really, really basic. Understand the basic principles of animation, and then start getting into more complex characters. But like I said, there's a whole bunch of free stuff out there on the web. You just have to do a search. We've got rigs like this where just 3 or 4 curves. This is where you need to start if you're first starting out, to the more complex characters like Twigs here. So I'm going to jump back over into our character. So you can see here, Twigs, I'm going to just jump into a perspective view. This is our Twigs character, so this is more of a professional rig. I'm going to go and unhide my curves. So I've got my curves here. can see now that those curves have appeared. This is exactly what we were looking at in our video. So what I mean by selecting a curve, so I can just isolate this one curve, and you can see up here, you know, it's got a bunch of different options that I can do here. So if I hit E on the keyboard, for example, I'm going to rotate his head, and you can see it's moving everything. It's not just moving the neck, it's moving the head, it's moving the hat, so everything is grouped accordingly. So I can, you know, do that, and I'm just going to show you exactly how animation is done within Maya using a character like this. So maybe I'll just zero that guy out again. And like I said before, we've got this timeline down the bottom here. So I want to select this key. I've got rotate and X. I'm going to hit S on the keyboard, and what it does is add this keyframe at 1. So you can. This is the most basic of animation. So I can sit here. So then I'm going to say, okay, at frame say 50, I'm going to rotate its head, Twigs's head, to that position there, and then I'm going to hit S on the keyboard again. And then if I take it back, now I've got an animation. I'm going to hit play, and you can see his head rotating back. So
it's just calculated what you want to do between those steps, like keyframe animation.
Exactly, but you can see how the computer's worked out those different frames in between, right? So I've just done key poses or key poses here. So, you know, and this is what I'll talk more about when we get to the animation section. But it's really, you know, when you're first animating, you don't want to go through and do these in between frames. Really, all you're doing is what they call is a technique called blocking out, right? So, you know, if I've got this guy, for example, that's looking up and then he moves his head, or he makes a quick movement to one side, I'm just putting in that last frame where he's at that sort of position, right? So it's not going through and doing every single frame. The computer does a lot of that work for us, which is, but you know, even when you keyframe like this, it's still a hell of a lot of work. So when you look at, you know, some of those Pixar movies and you know, the 3D animation films, you know, there's so much work that goes into something like that. So, you know, I can go through, for example, and select this group of curves here, and it's, you know, I can go through and then hit W on here and move my arm around, you know. So these are all different controls that will just react depending on how my model's been rigged, right? So again, maybe I want to grab the gun out, so I can just grab that and move that around. So I'm grabbing, and each one of these curves, you know, if I wanted to do something different with it, then each curve does something different. So example, you know, if I could rotate back the actual trigger here and pull that back, and just, I'm setting keyframes on all these curves to be able to get my final animation. So again, yeah, you're working on the time frame going through. So what I want to do is just actually show this guy, which is so how much time do we have left in this session?
So we have about 45 minutes left entirely.
No, I mean before the first Q&A.
Q&A's around now, so I think we'll probably keep it short.
I think we could. That's probably a good place just to start. We can start there because I'm about to go into animation, so that would be perfect.
Okay, cool. Just 1 sec. So there was a question just around like computer power again. We mentioned this kind of before. You're on I'm sure you're on a beast of a machine over there, but do you need to like invest in a decent machine to get into 3D?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You do need a good machine. I mean, the computer's using a lot of, you know, it's very hungry for computation for these 3D programs. I'm running Substance Painter, Maya, You know, so in multiple programs at one time. So I do have but I use it for demos for this stuff. So I do have a good machine. But yes, you do need to invest in a good machine. I think, you know, for something like Substance programs, the better graphics card that you have, you know, the better the program's going to perform. It's a lot of it's got to do with your graphics card having sort of the latest and greatest.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And Festus was asking, when you're working with layers in Painter or Alchemist, can you group layers and apply other effects to the whole group?
You can't currently do that in Alchemist. You can do that in Painter. So it's the same as in Photoshop. You can create a folder and then you can mask that folder and build on top of that sort of layer. In Alchemist, you can't create folders yet and add effects to a group.
Cool. Maybe one more question, because I'm not concerned. I'm conscious of time. Is there a LUTs capacity, or is it too early to be thinking about LUTs at this stage?
Well, that is a whole Pandora's box if you start talking about LUTs. There is, and LUTs for people that don't know what that term means is a lookup table. So it's a complex science when we start talking about color space. Substance Painter do have LUTs, and you know, I'm not going to go down this wormhole, but you know, depending on whether you're working in films or in games, or there's different lookup tables, which is simply color spaces. So it's a very complex thing, but Substance Painter does have LUTs, and you know, I know Substance Designer have LUTs that you're able to work with. Alchemist, you know, you're working in PBR there, so you're working actually in HDRI images for lighting and stuff like that. So I don't think it has LUTs actually in Alchemist. I need to check up on that. I know Painter and Substance Designer do.
Yeah.
That's somebody's trying to ask a tricky question there.
Mm-hmm.
Who was that person?
That was Festus. Good old Festus. Always down there with the great questions.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we might move on to the next bit, because I know we ran out of time last week, so we definitely got a lot to get through. Mark is asking, Alwyn is Kiwi, right? Represent, bro. So there you go. Got another Kiwi in the house.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Kiwi through and through.
Awesome. All right. Should we jump into part 2? You can still ask questions as we're going along, guys. So don't feel like you can't ask questions. All right.
Right. Let's just pull that up. Yeah, so the next area that I want to talk about is animation, and this is really, you know, when people think about 3D, like animation is one of the first areas that are like, oh, I want to be a 3D animator, or the second one is probably a 3D modeling artist. There's so many different disciplines that are involved in animation, but yeah, the animation section is really where a lot of people gravitate towards. It takes a lot of time to become a really good animator. You know, you have teams. You think about those Pixar movies. There are hundreds of people or animators just, you know, working in that department alone. You find that people that come from a 2D animation background transition into 3D really nicely, because of, you know, a lot of those 2D principles do carry across into 3D animation. So they have a really good understanding of animation. So I just want to jump across to here, and so this is really looking at, you know, when we think about traditional animation, it's fairly simple to understand. This is animators drawing at 24 frames a second, so they're drawing every single frame for 24 frames to be able to get 1 second of animation, and it's the same principles for 3D animation, except for, like I said before, we don't have to do the in-between. When you think about, and I'm just going to scrub through this, I might let that play actually.
I love this movie.
So yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and this, you know, when you actually get into animation, I'm just going to stop there before we get into that. When you get into animation, and actually if you even try and do like a basic animation, and how long it takes, and the skill needed to be able to actually make your character come to life, like you have a newfound appreciation for what some of these old Walt Disney movies, like they are amazing, camera angles and how they're able to get expression. Like it really truly is amazing how they were able to animate some of these characters. So the other one the other sort of animation that's quite hot at the moment is an old school sort of technique, which is stop motion. When you think of films like Missing Link, I don't know if people have seen that, but this is again the same sort of idea where you're taking a photo and the individual. Whoops, sorry, I'll just scrub back through that. But taking photos and then moving it to the next position, taking another photo and moving it. So instead of drawing it, they're just repositioning these models or these puppets to be able to get a performance. And the amount of hours that it takes to be able to do a full feature film for this stuff is just incredible. I know for a fact that Missing Link had a team of like over 400 people working on it.
Wow.
And they, for the main character, the big hairy sort of dude, he had, I think, like something like over 100,000 of these face replacements just to be able to get that.
Super creepy.
Yeah, so they had to. Yeah, so for animation, you have to be able to define the mouth shape so it looks like the person is actually talking the words, right? So they had to create. They actually 3D printed these little face shapes to be able to replace on the actual character, but they had to print more than 100,000 of these little faces to be able to get the actual dialogue happening for it, which is just blows my mind. The people that create these types of films have an awful lot of, and you can see it there. So that's the face being replaced every single time that this thing talks. It's just amazing.
Wow.
And actually, stop motion is a lot closer to visual effects than we think, because you can see there they're shooting on green screen. So this is what happens when you're doing, a visual effects film. You'll shoot on green screen, right? So, and there's a lot of effects that are involved as well. So things like water and rain and snow, whatever it may be, is also part of, of actually the effects side of things. So it's a combination of this stop motion as well as 3D effects work going on. But yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful. It's a beautiful format, and I really love watching stop motion. So when we talk about...
Yeah, chat as well. Wow, holy cow, rad. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage people to go, watch them making of or behind the scenes. There's a lot of that sort of stuff on YouTube. And, like I said, you find a newfound appreciation for how these crafted films are made. The next thing I want to talk about is, like, if you're serious about getting into animation, or not even serious, but if you have a love for animating, then this book here is really the Bible for any animator. It's called The Animator's Survival Kit, and it really sources on old school techniques about animating. And I've actually got a digital version of that. So I'm just going to bring up. This is a digital version of it. So if I just kind of quickly scrub through some of what it looks like, but you can see here it's just showcasing the techniques of how to actually traditionally animate. But when you're animating in a 3D capacity, these same principles are in play. How you're just the position of the hips when you're walking, all these things that really just help an animation flow better. So curves, anything that's organic, there's natural curves that actually happen when you're animating. And if you have the more that you have an understanding of this type of stuff, the better animator you're going to be. So, I mean, I thoroughly recommend, purchasing this book or just finding it and downloading a PDF of it like I've done here, and being able to understand these basic principles. So just to talk about principles, So there's 12 principles of animation, right? So if you really get serious, like I said, these are the most basic principles that you need to understand. So there's things like squash and stretch, and you see this in your classic Pixar movies where an object will be falling and it's really elongated, and when it hits the ground it squashes and goes outwards. It's about emphasizing and exaggerating these animations to be able to really help us understand exactly how things are moving and through time. The anticipation, like when something big is about to fall over, there's a subtle anticipation animation that happens to really sell the idea that this thing's about to fall over, right? So it's all these types of subtleties in animation that a good animator will really understand and be able to bring through. It's things like slow in and slow out, or that's also referred to as ease in and ease out. So if anybody's working in After Effects doing subtle animations over a time frame, and After Effects has those same sort of abilities to be able to ease in and ease out. So instead of an animation being very linear, starting from A to B, you're able to speed up or slow down how it finishes or how it starts. Again, basic animation, but really important to be able to sell your idea. Secondary animation. This is smaller movements. So if I've got a face that's opening its mouth, then the animations are going to move. There's going to be certain movement in my cheek, so that's secondary animation. We're looking at arcs. Like I said before, everything that is organic has natural sort of arcs or curves that help the animation be a lot more graceful in its animation.
Cool.
Sorry, I just got something on the throat.
And this was who created these 12 principles of animation? Was that from the Disney?
Yeah, so sort of like the early days of animation. So Walt Disney days, man. This is like it's nothing revolutionary. These principles have been around for decades, and that's why it's so beautiful that they're still being used today. Just to sell the idea of these animations like Pixar and that. It's beautiful. Again, exaggerating. When it just helps heighten the animation. We've got like timing, which is probably one of the most fundamental of the 12 principles, is timing, and how something heavy is takes a lot longer to move through the time frame, and something a lot lighter obviously goes a lot faster, and even when it stops, that weight, how it moves forward and just emphasizes the weight of an object. So taking those 12 principles and now bringing them into a sort of a 3D world and being able to do it on the computer, this is kind of a 6-step breakdown of what an animator working on a feature film or would go through. So we talk about shooting reference. Now it's pivotal that if you get given a shot and you've got a character and you need to animate it in a certain way. You have to, basically a lot of animators will go out there and film themselves doing that animation so that they can use that, or they'll get somebody else, or they'll even get a paid actor to be able to come in and perform that animation. So it's really sourcing on that real life reference to be able to then mimic back into that 3D character. You see a lot of animators when you're working in the industry, they'll have mirrors on their desk, or they'll have like full mirrors that they're doing expressions, just really trying to study every little idiosyncrasy that happens within that animation that they're able to then bring back onto the character that they're animating into that 3D space. We're going to talk about key posing.
We hear about some of that from some of the illustrators that we've had on. If they really want to reference for something, or they want to really try to get the angle right, they'll take a photo or use a friend or a partner or something, take a couple of reference photos and bring them in to try to get it right. So you're saying like animators might have a mirror just next to their desk and they're just pulling faces and doing gestures and talking and things like that. It'd be a pretty wacky place to work.
Yeah, the animation partners department is always hilarious to walk through, because there's always people acting things out, and you see people pulling funny faces, and you're just like, what's going on in here? Has everybody gone mad? But a lot of animators have big personalities. They're very bubbly, and they're very animated themselves. And that's the challenge, I guess. When we think about an animation position, it's really for people that are working in animation, they might be dealing with 3 or 4 different characters, and they've all got different personalities. So they have to be able to animate those characters in different ways. So it's not like a traditional actor where they'll submerge themselves into a particular role and they're just acting that one role out, and they do it amazing. When you think of an animator as an actor, they're having to act out several different roles. And sometimes in the industry, you'll get given a shot, or a few shots, but you have to be consistent with the person, the animator that's animated those shots of that same character before you, right? So it's really obvious when you watch a film, and you can see animation styles change with different characters, and that's a dead giveaway that you can tell that different animators have animated that character, right? So what will happen in a big production is they'll have a lead animator who'll come through and basically block out all the different key poses for that animation of that character. Wow. And then an animator will come in, and then they'll add those the secondary animation and do the blocking. So you see, that's why, again, you look at animations like Pixar do, and the consistency in the animation. When you look, I look at that Spider-Man movie, and that was just amazing, the animation in there, and the camera angles, the cinematography. It's such a stunning movie that comes to mind when I think of animation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just want to...
Johanna's saying, does every animator need to take improv classes?
Well, actually, you get like a lot of studios that will bring actors in and actually help get animators doing acting classes, because that all really helps to being a better animator, right? So yeah, definitely doing animation classes, anything that you can do to and again, you can just video yourself doing some of these animations, But this is this is really getting towards becoming a professional in the industry. Like I said before, if you're first starting out, I would just go back to even just studying how a ball bounces, right, and just the speed and the weight at which it bounces. It's just looking at basic stuff first.
Yeah, I thought I freaked out for a second. I thought someone else jumped in on our live stream. I thought this was someone else just crashing our live streams. Like, hey guys,
it hacked it.
Yeah.
No, this is just of an actor here, and basically they're going through, and you can see they're shooting reference, right? So they've filmed themselves. He's got the wink happening. He's got the pointing finger happening, and then how does that translate to a character? So then we move to the blocking stage, or the key posing stage. So you can see we've got a character. He's got his finger up. The next keyframe will be him pointing, right? So again, not worrying about the in-betweens. And people, as an animator, you spend a lot of time just making sure that the key poses are correct. If this is wrong, and you've gone through and the animators come through and done all the secondary animation, then this can cause a lot of problems later on. So this is really paramount to having good animation and getting it right, because this is where you build on from these key poses. So then you move into blocking. So you can see here now we're going, we've added a few more sort of keyframes in between. Again, we're not doing every single keyframe, but it's just adding additional. You can see that the eyes are moving now. There's a bit more starting to happen. And then we go into what they call splining. So, splining is kind of, think of it like the ease in and ease out, what we were referring to before. It's having curve to be able to make the animation a lot smoother. So it's not this, robotic sort of animation that's happening. It's actually just a lot smoother. And then refining. So we're going into, starting to add a bit more animation. We know that, maybe there's movement in the elbows. It's not just so linear, straight point. There's a little bit more secondary animation starting to happen. And then finally, it's adding the the eyebrows moving, it's the lips moving, it's all those other mechanics that happen that when you're making these facial expressions. So that's kind of the stages that an animator will go through when they get like a character that they have to animate. Shoot the reference, block it out with the key poses, and then refine and smooth, and then secondary animation.
Wow. So there's just so much to it, right? Like that attention to detail and those small things that obviously we're picking up subconsciously as a viewer. So if you're watching an animation or watching a movie, there's so much going on, but a lot of it is in our subconscious.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why I just wanted to play twigs here. Now that we've kind of gone through and we've seen how a character gets rigged, the curves, animation curves that an animator uses to be able to animate the character, and then all those little secondary animations that happen. I just wanted to play this so people could see now, just go, wow, there's so much work involved in these big feature films that happen. So I'm just going to play this guy. So even just from this one little turntable, you can see he's gone through the full range of expressions, from being happy to being annoyed, being like, surprised by the fly on the can or whatever it is. And that, is great animation. You don't even, us as viewers, we're not thinking about the animation. We're believing the character, right? So, right. And animators, Jamaica, really believe that this character is alive, that it's got soul, it's got emotion, and it's being able to bring that to a character is just amazing to me. If the animation is bad in a film, it doesn't matter about the story. To me, personally, I think if I see really bad animation and I see bad lip sync and all the rest of it, that's all I'm focused on. I'm not even cared about the story anymore. I'm just like, oh, that is really bad animation. But the combination of a good story and good animation, and that's why Pixar, just every single film that they do, they just nail it, right? They just always a really great story. It's already original, and the team are the best. Just on that, I would say, for those that are starting, there's a website, and these guys have been around for a long time, and they're called Animation Mentor, and these guys have industry professionals that mentor students that come on. But it's if you go to their YouTube channel, they give away a lot of tutorials on starting out, and basic animations, like patient resource. You start looking at patient, and like I said,
about loading too much because we're losing you a little bit. So the internet might be having a little bit of a moment on your side. So maybe don't load up any more videos, just in case, because we might lose you.
All right, let me just pull that back down.
Yeah, it looks all great now.
Are you with me? Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight Animation Mentor, which you can add in a link in the chat, because it's, like I said, it's a really good place to start if you're first start. Whoops, I'll just bring that. Sorry, Flynn. Yeah. Then, so just covering that animation, like I said, it's a lot of work just to even get 20 seconds of animation. The next area I wanted, and my screen should be black, the next area that I wanted to talk about was really, we'll go back to that, was motion capture. Now, this is a technique that has been developed. So we have the mocap with our animations earlier on, and that's using those funny green suit sensors on it. So this is when we look at Planet of the Apes, now they're doing like facial capture. So this is performance capture. This is really capturing all those little facial movements and then translating that into our 3D character. So this technology is constantly being pushed. Planet of the Apes took it to another level where they were able to actually go outside of the studio and be able. Oh, I wanted to just to play that. Sorry, guys. I'm just going to play this through. And they were able to take this outside and use this sort of technology in actual environments outside, which is just amazing. So we can see here the guys in the suits are outside. All the motion is being captured on the computer and then being relayed or imported into these different characters. So I love this shot. You can see Andy Serkis here, who also played Gollum in Lord of the Rings, but you can see he's going to morph into the actual ape, and you can see just exactly all those little animations that are being picked up in his face that get transferred across to Caesar, the ape. So he's just going through that now, that transition.
That's such an incredible movie. Love that one.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and you can see fully. And I guess now you're thinking, well, why do we need animators if we've got motion capture and performance capture? The reason why we need animators is because even from humans to ape, the animations are all subtly different, right? So the mechanics of an ape's faces are different to that of a human. So we need animators to be able to still go in there, use this information as a starting point, and then be able to kind of really, again, exaggerate some of this animation so that it's really pushing the emotion of these performances. But yeah, phenomenal movie, and I like just the technology that was used. You can see there on that one, they had like a little sort of a mic that come down in front of the face. That's actually a really small camera that's filming the actor's face. So again, the animator can use that face as reference to go help them with the animations of the actual apes themselves. So it's doing a couple of things actually. It's videoing the face, and it's also recording those little dots that are on the actual face itself. And you can see there that was a muscle group. So when you go from rigging, you can add muscle sims to these characters. So it's very, each step is really technology being used to try and emulate, real world scenarios or characters. And that's why even when I look at, The Lion King, which was, a recent film, the quality of animals and the animation in that was just amazing. So yeah, I think I'm kind of almost at the end there, Flynn. If we wanted to jump back into maybe a bit of a Q&A, I'm not too sure where we're at with timing and stuff.
Yeah, we're getting pretty close to the end, guys. If there are any questions, please throw them in. We've got a couple minutes left. So yeah. So this rigging, I think you mentioned that people can download this. Maybe we should show that again, so people will have like a cool call to action to just go and grab. Oh, are you there?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll go back to my browser. Hopefully I'm not delaying too much on the web. You can go to, yep. Can you browse? Yeah. Yep. It's just coming up now. So you can go to Dr. Reels, and you can see, go to this URL, and you can just download this this rig. Like I said, even with the Animation Mentor, if you go to their website, they've got those basic balls and really basic characters for people that are first starting out. You can download it from there. There's a page up on the rookies which has beginners reels where you can source all these different models from. There's if you do a search, you can definitely find a lot of different animate, but know that some people are not professionals when they're rigging these things, so there'll be limitations. But this is a really fantastic reel for people that are really wanting to deep dive into a character and have a bit of fun with it.
Oh, that's cool. I think maybe the internet is deciding that we're going to finish up now, and because it's just decided to have a bit of a spluttering, I think, for the last kind of like 5 to 10 minutes. So what we might do is we might extend out our next session. We'll make sure we get to some of the questions.
Okay.
And we might finish up today just in case, because yeah, there's a little bit of popping and stuff like that. So I'm just going to bring up our schedule for the rest of this week. So here we are on Wednesday, getting started in 3D, part 2 with Alwyn Hunt. So we're part 3. We'll extend that out a little bit to cover some of the questions that we had today that we may not have gotten to. So this time next week. On Thursday, so this is tomorrow, where we've got photography with Tim Northey, TK North, which would be awesome. And then on Friday at 9 o'clock, we got photo manipulation with Ramesh, which is going to be super fun. And then also typography in motion with Sophie Eleanor. So we'll be animating some type as well. Yeah, so sorry about that, Alan. I think just that last 10 minutes, internet decided that we wanted to finish early today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm loading a lot of windows and browser windows and stuff like that, so it's probably, you know, Australian internet, as we know, Flynn, is not the best in the world.
Exactly.
So yeah, it probably didn't help that I had so much open.
Hey, it's always a miracle when we do a whole thing. So yeah, absolutely. But yeah, we're back next week, guys. Thank you so much for the questions. Thanks everyone for jumping in. We'll see you hopefully tomorrow, and we'll see you for part 3 with Alwyn Hunt this time next week. Oh, a little bit later actually. It's going to be a little bit later in the day, so it'll be around 10 o'clock next week. So we hope to see you then, and thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, Alwyn.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, Flynn, and thanks for tuning in, everybody. If you have any questions, yeah, just throw it even up on Discord. I can jump in there and answer a few questions as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. See you guys.
See ya.